Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech video. Today I'm going to be showing my current Grixis Gwendlyn Di Corci deck. If you've seen my channel, I keep spamming decks with her as the commander over and over again, and it's all sorts of different crappy decks. The first time I showed a Gwendolyn deck, it was a Grixis clone deck, and that's actually where we're back. I love clone decks. I'm no longer playing or restricting myself to mono blue clones. I saw a new card that came out in a set a few sets ago, the Indomitable Creativity, and it just made me want to build Grixis clones all over again. So, let's go through the deck real quick. If you're unfamiliar with Gwendolyn, she's a 4-drop 3/5 human rogue printed in Legends. She's one of the few Legends that isn't absolutely terrible. Her color requirements up here being red, black, black, blue is pretty stringent. So if she's going to come out early, that means you typically have to have a fairly elaborate mana base. She's actually not bad in 1v1 competitive brews. Her ability is on your turn, you can tap her to make an opponent discard a card at random. So if you have some slight passive untap effects naturally in your deck, you can start to him to Torok your opponents. Pretty good. So in 1v1, she can be obnoxious, especially if she comes out early and you have one of those effects. And that 5-drop or 5 power, that 5 toughness also makes it. She's pretty good at fending off some aggro as well. The only bad side, of course, is you have to do it on your turn, which does make it a little bit awkward tapping down your possible blocker. But she gives us the most important power on her, is she gives us the access to the Grixis colors in our deck. So let's set this over here. Again, this is a clone deck, so let's go through the current clones I am running. There are a bunch. This is the entire stack of clone creatures as well as clone effects. So let's start with the default clone. Most clones, it's been around forever. It's just a 4-drop 0/0, comes into play as a creature. There's always a rules argument when you have to teach new kids how clones work. It's not a come into play effect like enter the battlefield trigger. There's a state between resolution and them actually resolving and coming into play where they choose their target. And that's how they pass counter spells and whatnot. So going through the rest of the clones, we have a 2-drop clone that if you look at it funny, it goes away. Gigantoplasm can be a pretty big clone. It's like a weird version of Mirror Entity. Is that the changeling? I don't remember. It's some white crap card. Then we have the Sakushima Student, another possible cheap clone if we ninjutsu it out. A nice way of rebuying some creatures in the deck simply because we're rebouncing a clone or another enter the battlefield trigger. A new clone, a flash clone. It's literally clone with flash. Strict upgrade. Strict upgrade, clone that comes into play, but I can recurt from the graveyard. I like the fact that Embalm does not require this or bend the rules. I can still play this in a non-white deck. Metamorph is one of the classically stronger clones. It comes into play as an artifact or a creature. So this could be a 3-drop Gilded Lotus if we just want to match our opponent's ramp. Impersonator is another strict upgrade, a clone where it just comes into play as anything but a land. Like this could be a Planeswalker. Then we have Sakushima, a bounce in a turn clone. A lot of people just try to spam her ability and it's always have to remind them that she only bounces it into turn. But the fact that she can save herself, and if someone somehow board wipes at instant speed when she's on the stack, she still can come in as a 3/1. So this is a pretty powerful clone. We have 2 non-mono blue clones. We have the blue-black one, which likes to kill the original version it clones, and the blue-red one, which has haste and dethrone. It's just weird. Of all these clone variants we've seen, we've never seen a blue-white clone. And that kind of bugs me. It's just like, there's so many versions of clone out, this is not the blue-white one. Anyways, we have a 5-drop, which is a Vesuvan. It can just switch around a little bit. And another 5-drop, which this is based off of, is the Upkeep Flip clone. This one tends to be paired with Brine Elemental, making Pickles lock, which I don't like. It's just an annoying, obnoxious way of playing the game. And this one is just something that we can keep flipping up and down. Of course, when you remorph it, you don't rebuy enter the battlefield triggers, but you can just pick a better thing that may die or attack or whatever. Those are the physical clones. We have some spell clones, things that make instant speed clones. There is, of course, things like crap. There's just a bunch of stupid shit in the deck. So making instant speed clone of something on my side is powerful for 3 mana. Flashing it back, a lot of people forget that you can even flash it back. There is another version of this that was in the deck for 3 blue, the Faded Infatuation. I didn't want to run the 3 blue spell in my deck simply because I didn't want to stress my mana base that much. But of course that is another version of this card if you like it. Tempt with Reflections is more of a casual gimmick. I like targeting Solemn Simulacrums with this because everybody wants Solemn Simulacrum. The way this deck wins is generating a lot of mana and just getting more card draw. Solemn is probably the best clone target in the entire deck. In most games that this deck wins with is by me riding the back of cloned Solemn Simulacrums. So this is secretly one of the better cards in the deck if that Solemn is out. Of course I have to have a creature to control. That's the only bad side to this 4-drop. Right, of course, is a dumb card. 4-drop clone is standard, but 9-drop for 5 clones is pretty good. Stolen Identity is usually held up until I have a way of attacking through. Some kind of flying, 1/1, whatever it takes just to get a secondary clone, because that means this is essentially 6 mana for 2 clones. Again, this can hit artifacts, so if there's something like a Gilded Lotus or something nice out that you can make a copy of, then that's even better. Dance of Many is a 2-drop clone that has a 2 mana cost upkeep effect. It's not cumulative, but it's just another 2-drop clone. So if you're looking just for another rebuy, then just, yeah. Copy Enchantment sometimes sits in our hand because not a lot of decks runs enchantments, but the off chance of getting someone's Zendikar Resurgent or Mirage Wake or whatever, or Grave Pact, just nice for 3 mana. Copy Artifact, still susceptible to enchantment nonsense, but this could be anything from a Soul Ring to a Solemn. Same thing, a Soul Ring to a Solemn to a Gilded Lotus. Now the issue with clone decks, if the opponents do not play anything worthy of cloning, then we ourselves have to have targets. Fairy Artisan is a very interesting card. This is more of a troll card, really. It can backfire if the opponents are playing Edict's Flesh Bag crap, because that can cause us to wreck our own board sometimes. Now, what this does, essentially, it gives me a temporary token of any creature that enters the battlefield on their side, and I get the value. Like if they play a Solemn, I get a Solemn with the enter battlefield trigger. What typically happens is this forces the opponents to play big shit followed by small shit. Which, I mean, you're still having a 4-drop 2/2 flyer creature that is manipulating their plays. That's still powerful. Nice troll card. Baleful Strix is generic entry and draw. This is something fun to ninjutsu or to cipher the stolen identity on. It's just a generic filler that's always a nice target to clone. Solemn is one of the best clone targets in the deck. Super casual, like it doesn't seem very threatening to make an army of Solemns, but in a Grixis deck you're getting a lot of land entry, you're getting a lot of draw if they die. And there's again, this deck likes Indomitable Creativity, a type of polymorph effect. So having a bunch of artifact targets is great. Crypt Angel is here mainly because I like the artwork. Of course, this is a predominantly blue deck, so this is essentially a flying grave robber. It just returns some previously dead clone from my graveyard to my hand. Bolus, of course, is a generic filler. Just really powerful in effects like this where there's some reanimation in the deck, so he's fun to fiddle around with, drawing extra, gaining extra. The deck does have a tendency to get hurt early because I don't like blocking with my clones when I could just try to build a bigger army. So he's a nice way of building back up. Draw Drifter, of course, is a generic clone target. Just draw 2 cards every time you clone it. Same thing, Sphinx of Athun fills your hand up real fast. Factor Fiction on a clone is nice. And Kaiga, this is one that's an interesting clone target, especially if you have the instant speed clone spell like the Cackling Counterpart, because that means you have, every clone essentially becomes a mind control. Deadeye Navigator, it goes with about every single clone that has an entry trigger, just get some good value. He tends to die real fast. Same thing, Rune Scar, something your opponents don't like the idea of you cloning, because every time you clone it, you just keep rebuying your clones, or getting... My favorite thing, of course, is getting the Rite of Replication, because if I have the mana to cast him and the Rite on the following turn, I get 5 demons and 5 more tutors. Kedark Leviathan is one of the most obnoxious things to clone. Every time you clone it, it bounces every non-land permanent back to everyone's hand, including itself, so you can cycle this in a clone over and over again. This can be good and bad. It's good if you have some kind of enter the battlefield value. If you are constantly casting a Solemn with this sequence, then you're going to keep on ramping ahead of your opponents. Your opponents could be doing the same thing, though, so sometimes you don't want to always spam that. Then we have, of course, the Game Enders. We have 3 Titans, the Frost Titties, Grave Titan, and Inferno Titan. Great things to clone just to generate a nasty board presence. And we have the 3 Gearhawks. There's a few instances in the deck that this can target. Not a whole bunch, but it's usually going to be a Factor Fiction or something silly. Then we have the Noxious Gearhawk for removal, and Combustible Gearhawk because I have a lot of 6+ drops in this deck. I'm also slightly OCD, so having everything match helps. Then there's the spells. This is not really a lot of spells for a Grixis deck. You would think there'd be some counter magic, protection, and whatnot, but not really. We have some fillers. Nice draw, like just cheap ways of filling our hand. If there's nothing to clone, we can always drop a 4-drop on turn 3-ish because we have a lot of rocks. Or we can just draw some cards. Draw some cards and draw some cards. Or we can draw a lot of cards. Recurring Insight is not very competitive, but in a multiplayer 40 life traditional EDH format, this tends to just draw you a bunch of cards. Ghostly Flicker goes with all the clones because we can rebuy their entry. There's a lot of combos you can do with Ghostly Flicker. There's reprinted versions of Ghostly Flicker called Displace and Essence Flux and whatnot. But this is here just to save something from being removed or to rebuy and enter the battlefield trigger of some kind. Deluge is our 3-drop board wipe. I don't have an extra Damnation, otherwise it would be here. But we have an 8-drop board wipe, so we can draw a bunch of cards. And we have a Blast Act for even more. Victimize is a little bit of reanimation nonsense in here. Again, I have to sack a creature, but I can return 2. So the issue with 2 things coming to play at the same time, especially if like why people like board wiping in response to a clone. If there's nothing in play for the clone to target, it won't see what's coming in. Like I can't have 2 creatures coming in at the same time as the same thing if one's a clone and one's something I want to clone. But we have Whip, so this is kind of a filler. The deck, of course, hurts itself. There's not a lot of recursion. There's not a lot of sustainability, really. So this is a good way of gaining some extra life. Rise is, of course, a win more card. There's a lot of win more cards I could put in the slot. Anything from like Insurrection. This is a good one because I have a lot of creatures in the deck. So this will at least, even like a mild Rise, just to rebuy a few clones, is still pretty good. We have Rift because we're playing mono blue. Bribery, again, and sometimes the opponents, they think they can play around clones by not casting their threats. So the best thing to do is to go get their threat. Then we have 2 fun cards. I love Polymorph. If you have not seen, I just recently posted a Vendilion Click deck, which is basically a Polymorph Baral variant deck. These 2 are in this deck. Synthetic Destiny is a fun instant speed card. If I have a somewhat moderate board presence, I can wipe my own board and go get more creatures. This is great if someone tries to remove multiple things if they themselves still have a good clone target on play. The issue is, of course, they all come into play at the same time at the end of that turn I choose to do this. So if, for example, I have all clones entering the battlefield, there's no target for them, or if the only target is coming in with them, they won't see that same card. I can't have them entering at the same time, or the clones just all die. The more interesting one that's a new card, Indomitable Creativity. This one destroys X targets or creatures and or artifacts. So I can destroy my own creatures, which means I can draw if a Solemn Dying. I can destroy my own mana rocks. I can destroy my own opponent's enter the battlefield hate like a Torpor Orb, or their creatures. And then you essentially polymorph until you hit an artifact or creature. In this deck, it's great. Like I have mana rocks and creatures. So I'm almost always going to hit something valuable. It's always a gamble hitting the opponents. The artwork on this card is fucking gorgeous too. But this is just kind of one of the reasons to run red in clones, because I can literally just generate an out of nowhere board presence. Every time I play that card, it's fun. There's a handful of artifacts. They're all ramp and a single boots. This is here just to keep whatever threat I have that I want to clone later safe. Cloning does not target, so I can give it Shroud. I can put this on Gwendolyn if I want to keep her safe. But then we have lots of ramp. We have a Soul Ring and a Wayfarer's Bauble for turn 1. If you've seen me play Grixis decks on my lists and whatnot, you've seen every bit of this ramp before. There's 3 diamonds, 3 signets. My favorite things to do in Grixis are having a turn 1 or 2 ramp so I can have a turn 4 play, such as a Gwendolyn. Let's go on to the lands. Same thing, if you've seen my recent Grixis decks, you've seen these lands before. They're basically the same tuned ones I like. I just don't play alpha beta duels. So if you consider whatever a Grixis land base to be optimal without duels, then you're looking at it. So we have Reliquary Tower and an Ancient Tomb. This helps get a Signet out early. Myriad Landscape to fix some basics. So Command Tower for the colors, same thing, Crumbling and Reflecting Pool. Just a lot of 3-color decks. Citadel is a leftover. This is just a cute gimmicky card. It's really not good. Bolt myself, but I like the card. It comes to play untapped. We have the 3 on-color fetch lands. the 3 on-color shock lands because they are fetchable with lands. These 2 Tango lands, or whatever they're called, because you can still fetch them. I don't have the cycling lands in here. They are fetchable, but I don't really like the chance of having them come into play tapped. If these were a 2-color deck, I would play those. 3 filters. 3, this is fun with our general. This is really the only way of untapping her in the deck, but this can essentially make Gwendolyn a Hymn to Torok because you're investing 2 mana to untap her. And there's a lot of things you can do in a Gwendolyn deck. You can put like Freed from the Real, Penum's Aura, all sorts of ways. There's a few creatures you can tap to untap a creature, or human, whatnot. But this is the only one in the deck to really affect her. But these are here just to give creatures, legendary creatures, extra effect. Politically, they're interesting because you can give or barter for your opponents to give them fear or first strike or something. Then a lot of basics. Again, I have a tendency to spam, cast, or clone Solemn in this deck. So we have a bunch of basics. I think there's like 6 or 7 islands, then 6 or 7 swamps, and then like 5 or so mountains. But yeah, this is my current Grixis deck. I have a tendency to default to clones when I'm running dry on ideas or there's nothing interesting. They just printed a new Grixis Nicol Bolas, so I may even go back and switch this to a Planeswalker deck again, like the Croesus video I had a year or 2 ago. But I always enjoy clones. Clones are a nice casual way of matching your opponent's power level, assuming they're not spiky turn 3 combo decks. Because a Grixis clone deck essentially is the power of either what you're playing, like a bunch of derpy draw creatures, or what your opponents are playing. It also gives you the best options of what is currently in play. So while you may be limited to what's in play, you're still at least getting the best of what's in play. Granted, you are typically a turn behind when it comes to attacking, but what these clone decks tend to be is just a giant value tempo deck. And that value tends to mean your hand is always full. You always have as much enter the battlefield value that's currently available to you. So they tend to be a bit brickish and a bit resilient, if not annoying. But yeah, if you have any ideas or opinions on clones, I don't think there is a white-blue clone. But yeah, if there's any other clones I've missed, I know there's a lot of clones I've missed. Like, there's things I just did not make the cut, like the Gargantuan and all sorts of other spells, but Mercurial Pretender is one I didn't like because it only targets my stuff, even though you can bounce it. But yeah, any ideas or opinions on clones? If you just like clones, give me a shout out. If not, hope you have a great day. Cheers.